Welcome back to our study of the Book of Jude. For those of you who have been following along, welcome back. Today we're going to be getting into verses 12 and 13 of the book here. Over the last number of weeks here, we've been looking at this warning from Jude, right, about these false teachers who were infiltrating the Christian church. And over the last few weeks here, we've been looking at a number of those characteristics of those false teachers that as Christians we can observe and pay attention to. And if we start seeing some of these traits in people, at very least, we should be cautious, right, about those kind of people, because as we're going to see in these couple of verses today, if those people, those false teachers, these apostate type Christians, so-called Christians, enter a church and are allowed to thrive, they can cause just immense destruction. Now, when it comes to these people, these false teachers, some of them just may be completely non-Christians or Christians in name only, fake Christians, people who just intentionally are coming into a church, putting on a show, trying to win over people's trust for the purpose of destruction. Or sometimes it could be what's known as an apostate, right? Somebody who claimed to have faith at one time, but had fallen away or had abandoned the true faith, and in doing so are taking other people down with them, if you will. In verses 12 and 13 here today, Jude gives us a number of different analogies to help us see the danger of allowing these type of people to stay within the body of believers within a local church. And as we're going to see, it's something that will cause great destruction, not only of the church itself, but even the testimony of the church for those who are watching on the outside. But let's look at verses 12 and 13. I'm going to read it, and then we will talk about it. So these people are dangerous reefs at your love feast, as they eat with you without reverence. They are shepherds who look out only for themselves. They are waterless clouds carried along by winds, trees in late autumn, fruitless, twice dead and uprooted. They are wild waves of the sea, foaming up their shameful deeds, wandering stars from whom the blackest of darkness is reserved forever. The first description or example he gives here in verse 12, he tells us these people are like dangerous reefs at your love feast. We'll get into love feast in a moment, but when you think about a ship that is sailing in the sea, especially along the coast, oftentimes along the coast there are reefs that are just underneath the waves, right? And if a ship captain is not careful, if he doesn't know the water well, he can hit those reefs and completely destroy his boat and sink it and cause all kind of damage, not only to his property, but more importantly to the sailors and to the people who could have to abandon ship, get caught in the waves, or even die. Right now, it's interesting that he gives us an example with these love feasts. Now, in the first century, the Christians had what was called these agape feasts. It's where the Christians of all status would gather together, share what they had, and would eat together in fellowship, but also commemorate the Lord's death, what we would know as communion, the Lord's Supper. And specifically, like in Acts chapter 2, verses 46 and 47, we can kind of read about where this all began. This was shortly after the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came. Not too many weeks thereafter Jesus was resurrected. It says, every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple and broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Every day the Lord added to their numbers those who were being saved. So these Christians would get together. They would, again, men and women from all different walks of life, the poor, the rich, the slave, the free, they'd all come together and display their unity as Christians, connected through the bond of Christ. And what these people, these false teachers were doing, they were coming in, and what it seems that Jude is warning about is what we see actually take place in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. That passage is often used when we take the Lord's Supper, where Paul gives his account of what the Lord showed him about communion of the Lord, or the Last Supper there. But what that passage in 1 Corinthians 11 describes is how the rich people of the Corinthian church, they would pretty much take over those feasts and be so selfish in them that they would eat all the food and get drunk off all the wine, so that there was nothing left for the many of the other people, right? And so they took something that was supposed to be reverential and completely just destroyed it, right? And the result of that was many of those people in the Corinthian church, the Lord caused to physically die because of that specific sin. And so Jude seems to be warning here about that exact same thing, because these people come in, they eat without reverence. There's no reverence towards the Lord. And as we see in the Corinthian church there, that can lead to devastating results for the people in a church when you disrespect the Lord's table like that. He also describes him here as shepherds who only look out for themselves. The idea of a shepherd is one who takes care of sheep, right? I mean, sheep are absolutely helpless. They have no defense mechanism, if you will, when it comes to predators. And so their protection is solely upon their shepherd kind of watching over and guarding them. But these type of false teachers, these apostate people that come into churches, they're not thinking about anybody else. They don't care about what happens to anybody else. They're only there for themselves. They have completely selfish motives, and they don't care how their actions, how their deeds, how their teachings impact anybody else. They're only there again for themselves. Talks here about how they're like waterless clouds carried along by the winds. The analogy I like to use is, imagine being in the middle of summer, and you're a farmer, right? And you're begging for water. Your corn's wilting, turning purple as it does, right? And you're just begging for some rain to come, or else your entire crop's gonna wither and die. And every morning you wake up and you see these puffy clouds start coming along, and yet by midday they kind of just evaporate and go away. And the point is, they're just absolutely useless. The clouds have absolutely no value. Not only that, it would just discourage the farmer. And like these apostate false teachers within a Christian community, they're like that. They come in promising knowledge, promising they have all this information, promising these different things, and in reality, all that they bring in the church is just worthless. And in the end, it just causes destruction along the way. Another example he uses here is that of like trees and laid autumn. Imagine you're an orchard owner, and your entire living was dependent upon your apples coming into season, right? So you can sell that produce to the people, and your business is kind of dependent on that to survive, right? But you get to the end of the year, and boy, those trees they're beautiful, green leaves, they look healthy, nice solid branches, but there's no apples. Again, the illustration is, what's the point, right? They're absolutely useless. They provide absolutely no value whatsoever to a person, or to, in this case, to a church. He talks about here about how they're twice dead and uprooted. What's interesting about that phrase is that it's very likely speaking of the second death. And so it's not only that these people provide no value to a church. These are people who are going to be rejected by the Lord, and anybody that they carry along with them in their error will experience the same fate someday, right? Which is the second death, which is to be separated from God forever in a place called hell, which is obviously a horrible thing. And then in verse 13, they're like wild waves of the sea, foaming up their shameful deeds. If you've ever been on the beach, especially in the morning after a storm, you'll notice there's just all kinds of just trash and junk and seaweed, and you can just see the destructive force of the waves. And here it kind of describes these people like waves of the sea, foaming up their shameful deeds. I like what the commentator Warren Wiersbe said about this. He says, all that the great swelling words of the apostates can produce is foam and garbage. The true teachers of the word bring up the treasures of the deep, but these false teachers produce only refuse or garbage. And what they boast about, they really ought to be ashamed of. So again, it's just using this example to teach us that these false teachers provide absolutely no value whatsoever. In fact, the opposite is true. They provide generally speaking, destruction in the life of the church. And the last thing here is it could describe them as wandering stars, for whom the blackness of darkness is reserved forever. You know, these people often shine bright for a time, right? They stand out because they're trying to. The whole point of this is these people are trying to gain a following. They're trying to get people to follow them in their error. They're trying to make themselves look good. It's all about them. They're trying to be popular within the church. And the thing of it is people who follow these people, well, they'll end up in the same. They end up in the same place, which is nowhere, destruction in the end, right? You think about a wandering star. We're talking about a shooting star that just very briefly kind of flows through a sky. It's bright for a second, right? Then it goes away. Or maybe even talking about something like a comet, right? That you see that's noticeable. It's bright there, the shining star, but it just kind of flows off into oblivion, right? Into the black of space. And it's kind of the idea here, is that in the end, these false teachers, they're going no place good. I mean, these false teachers are going to end up judged by the Lord and are going to spend eternity in hell. And again, the reason Jude is warning us about this is because of a number of things, right? Even just from a practical perspective, if you have these people in a church that are just absolutely selfish, only in it for themselves, causing problems, causing destruction, what does that do to the testimony of a church? It completely destroys the testimony of a church to the people on the outside looking in that we're supposed to be reaching, which is obviously a problem. And not only that, what does it do to the people inside of the church? It completely takes away one of the great purposes of the church, which is to experience the camaraderie of Christian love, where Christians genuinely are coming alongside of one another and building one another up and helping each other walk through this world that is so hard to live as a Christian. But if this is going on, it completely destroys what the Lord has purposed the church to be and the benefit for His people that He has planned for them to have within the church. And so it causes that problems. That problem. Not only that, if these false teachers are allowed to thrive, the natural result is that they are going to lead people into their error, where people are going to be led into false teachings about Christ, false teachings about the gospel, and you'll have people filling up churches who have a false sense of hope, thinking they're saved when in fact they are not saved because they have believed a false gospel. They have never truly repented of sin, surrendered to Christ, that whole type of thing. I mean, the examples we could talk about, we could go on for a very long time, especially in the context of the modern day, where you have people filling churches all over the world who, for all intents and purposes, look like a Christian on Sunday, and you look at their lives outside of the week, and they look nothing like Christ. They look, in fact, exactly like the world. And it's because of situations like that specifically that it is so important that churches guard their people, that we're paying attention to these type of people that want to come in and spew this false doctrine, that want to lead people astray into sin, and into things that the Bible calls sin, right? Again, we could talk about a lot of examples, but the point of it is as we've seen over these last number of weeks, we as a church are called to pay attention. Pay attention to the people that are there. Be watching, guard ourselves, guard the people around us so that the church can thrive, so that the church can be a place where people can be saved, where people can be built up in their faith, so that we can walk through this world in a way that honors Christ. Next week, we'll get into the next couple of verses, but that's it for today. You guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.